Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Emergent Leadership. Today, I am fortunate enough to be with Jacob Johnson from Pearland Fire Department. Jacob, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad to have you on the show. I wanted to talk to Jacob today. Want to learn a little bit for those who don't know you about your path to leadership, how you got to the role you're in today. And then, of course, we'll dive into some of the things in your world that have helped mold you and shape you into the leader that you are, and talk about some of the cool things that you've got going on that others might be able to use in their path
Yeah,
to
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk.
So tell me a little bit about you. So you are currently the battalion chief at a Pearland, which is a city in Texas outside of Houston, for those who don't know. Tell me a little bit about your path. Have you always been in the fire department?
Sure. So, I've been in the fire department since I was 15. I had a volunteer house right down the road from me that, offered junior volunteer firefighter memberships, and I jumped on board as soon as I could. And it just kind of worked my way up to where I am. It was a bumpy path, and it took a lot of, I guess you could call it trials and tribulations and celebrations and victories and a lot of losses. But the thing that always stuck to me is that I always seem to have someone to look up to and able to really kind of look at them and say, hey, like that's who I want to be, or I want to be like this person. And now I feel like I'm in a spot where I can be that person for somebody else.
Yeah, that's crazy. So that childlike innocence, you at 15 years old, you're still in high school at that point. How did you get plugged into that
Right,
volunteer?
right.
Did you know someone who was in the department, or how did you get plugged in?
Yeah. So, well, actually, my ag teacher, my FFA teacher, her boyfriend at the time, which is now her husband for going on 20 years, was a volunteer fireman there and a Houston fireman, a career fireman. And so she hooked me up with him, and he invited me to the firehouse. And before I knew it, I filled out an application, got a set of gear, and said, "Hey, show up every Thursday to train." So I did, and then now here I am, 20 years later.
That's awesome. Most people have a story about, they saw something, or they were in their kind of adult life, or a couple years later where they, felt like they couldn't fix a problem, and they learned to jump in century to fix a problem. But it sounds like it was a typical case of like, hey, we get to go fast and do cool things at 15, probably, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They told me, they said, "Hey, you get to come and, you can play water boy basically and just ride the pumper and pass out water to all the firemen fighting fire, but you get to do this and you get to have a uniform and you get to train." So I said, well, let's do it, man. I always had, a liking for the fire department. A lot of people say, oh, I always wanted to be that since I was a kid, but I can't really say that. It wasn't like I grew up saying I have to be a fireman. It was just always, I wanted to be one. And lucky enough, Katy Volunteer Fire Department gave me that start.
That's awesome. So you got started. Obviously, 20 years later, something's working for you. You and I got
Sure.
connected through LinkedIn. Actually, just mutual connections on LinkedIn. We've never met in person, so I'm glad to know you now.
Right.
But you had published an article and had put some stuff out about how to be a mentor. I want to talk a little bit about your mentorship journey. Obviously, as a child, you're talking about the process of mentorship. You found somebody who was in a department who kind of took you under their wing and brought you on, gave you an opportunity, gave you a chance. But you also have some experiences in your childhood. I see a huge, stuffed duck behind your head.
Right.
For those who aren't watching the video, this man's a hunter. So you've
Yeah.
shared with me some of the stories about your hunting experiences, and it sounds like you've got a really strong mentor path that's helped you get to kind of where you are. And I'd love to hear about those mentors in your life, Jacob.
Yeah, sure. So, it was really simple for me. My dad, we're from Louisiana originally, right? And so I grew up hunting in the bayous of Louisiana and in the rice fields. And my dad had me out there, clogging through the mud when I was 3 years old. And he would bring me out there. And every time he brought me, he would say, this is how we set up these decoys. And this is why we're setting up these decoys. And it got to where when I was 5 and 6 years old, my dad would put me with a group of adults and say, listen to my son. He's going to tell you how to put out these decoys, and that's what you do. And so then it went into, duck and goose calling, and then went into competition calling and winning competitions. And then which eventually led to me becoming a guide, a waterfowl guide at 16 years old. and taking out adults hunting who have never hunted before, and were, you know, basically looking at me to teach them how to hunt in a 3-4 hour window. So, you know, having those experiences through life and have
something you've been doing since you were 3 or 4 years old.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, like when people look at, you know, like you're 35, but you say you have 32 years experience hunting. Well, yeah, I mean, I was out there with a sack of donuts and a chocolate milk when I was 3, you know, and I was learning. So, you know, when you have those things, it really brings to perspective, like, okay, I have the knowledge and I have this skill, and then I'm able to pass it on. And for me to experience that at a young age, I think that really set my path to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being empowered as someone who generally wouldn't be. Like, I can relate to that. I was working at a gym when I was 15. And so it's not guns, it's not, you know, rifles and shotguns and leading people that could, you know, really hurt themselves in that way. But I was writing workout programs for 50 and 60 years old at 15. And so it's an interesting place to be in when you know that you're not, air quotes, supposed to be able to teach the adults how to do things at that age.
Well, but and I think writing a workout plan is even more dangerous than bringing them hunting. I mean, because if it doesn't work, then you got a lot of explaining to do.
It might be, but it's, you know, it's a cool thing to see that at that young age that people entrusted and trusted that you're going to take care of them. And so I'm curious to know, obviously that's something that's been a part of your life for many years, but how does that transition into the fire department? How do you use that history of teaching and showing and educating in your role today, Jacob?
So, you know, I mean, I think it comes in a lot of different facets. I think that, you know, when a rookie hits the fire station, right, they come with a base knowledge. And one of the things that I like to compare it to is the military. So when you join the military, you go to basic training and you learn the very basics of the military, whatever branch you're in. And then they send you to MOS, right, for whatever you're signed up to be, whether it's infantryman or, you know, bomb diffusers or whatever it is. They send you there to like hone in that specific skill. And so I look at it as these rookies are coming to the fire station as their MOS. And so it's our job to turn them into firemen. They have the very basic knowledge that you could have, but then they look to us to really teach that and to really bring them to that next level. And I think being able to go back to how I was raised and remember how my dad would, you know, literally take my hand and say, I want you to put this decoy here because of this reason. I'm able to take that and say, okay, Proby, I want you to take this hose and I want you to handle it this way for this reason. And then it gives him something to grasp onto rather than just, I did what or you're doing what I told you to say, right? Or this is how you do it. And I don't care why, but you're going to do it because I tell you to. And I think that really leaves an empty feeling within the rookies if you don't have that moment to explain the why.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something that's empowering. And so have you ever had a chance, obviously that's your comfort zone, is being able to take the time and spend the time. Have you ever been in a position where you didn't have the time and, you know, it either went really well or maybe didn't go so well and you're like, okay, hard lesson learned, you know, not gonna go down that path again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to say, way more failures in leadership than I've had victories, right? And it's hard to admit that, and it's hard to let that sink in sometimes, but I think it's very vital to my own growth, and I think it's very vital to a lot of the leaders out there that they need to admit their failures in order to grow forward. I had this kid, Chris Callan. He was a good Proby, but I didn't do my job in teaching him. And I failed him as a leader. And that's what really kicked off my leadership and mentoring struggles. And that's what really kicked off I need to change the way I'm thinking. And this kid ended up losing his job after he went work for another shift. And I always said he didn't succeed on that shift because I didn't do my job from the beginning. And so, you know, realizing that and letting that be, I guess you could say, the candlestick that I lit to move past that and become a better leader and a better mentor, is what most people need. They need that failure, that one, instance where they can say, I didn't do my job, I didn't succeed, and now because of that, this person's suffering, and then it pushes them to that next level.
I think that ownership piece is important, but just to note, there's always a lot of reasons why people aren't successful in their roles. And I'm sure it wasn't all because you didn't do something. But I'm curious to know, what is it that you
Right.
feel, how do you feel like you failed him? What did you not offer? What did you not done that you feel like was, obviously you're attributing to his career failure, which is a lot of weight to hold on your shoulders, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is, but I've tried to take that as a positive, in the fact that I'm growing, and the fact that I still keep in contact with that kid today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to go back and make sure that he's doing okay and really take that ownership. But I think what happened is that I lost the reasoning, and I lost giving the why when I was trying to explain something. So when he would mess up, I would tell him, you're messing up, gone. Right. And I wouldn't tell him how to fix it. I wouldn't teach him how to fix it. I wouldn't show him what he was doing wrong and how to overcome it. I would just say, well, you're doing it wrong, get it better. I remember specifically one time he said, I'm not doing well at handling the hose. How can I do better at handling the hose? And he was a little kid. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, just gain weight. Well, that was terrible. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, terrible. But I remember at that moment, like, I've done everything I can for this kid, and he's still not holding the hose, and he's getting beat up every day by the hose. So what am I doing? Or what am I doing wrong? And at that point, I thought I wasn't doing anything wrong. And then when he went to the other shift and I was told, like, he's doing this and he's doing this and he's doing that, it really started to fester. And then I said, well, you know what? I never taught him anything. I never showed him what I showed other people. I never showed him how to handle the hose. I never showed him how to do a search and a rescue and all these important, most vital things to the job. I never got dirty with him and showed him. I just always blamed him.
Why
And
was that? Do you feel comfortable talking? Do you know why?
Sure. At that point in my career, I think most of it was I'd gotten a little complacent in my role as an officer, as a company officer. I think I'd gotten a little cocky, that I thought, well, I've been an officer for a few years and I've made some fires and I've had 2 successful rookies. So, either the kid's going to make it or he's not. And, Chris Callan was the first rookie to come to my station that had 0 experience. And so when he didn't pick up on things like the other rookies that came with experience, I just attributed it to him and said, see you later.
Right.
Rather than recognizing, like, well, he doesn't have the experience and I need to give him that.
Yeah. He was your lesson for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes you just don't know your lesson until you're out of it. Right. And
that's right.
What the lesson really is. And so it sounds like, you had a less than a failure, maybe just a missed opportunity to really learn how to coach and learn how to guide and learn how to really dive heavy into that mentorship. Mentorship is easy when you're mentoring somebody you like, somebody who's similar to you. Leadership is easy when you surround yourself with people that are just like you.
Sure.
The hard part and real leadership comes when you don't agree and you don't communicate the same way and you don't have the same sets of values, or you didn't grow up in the same town, or you don't have any small talk. You can't, relationship building is easy when you don't put yourself around people. You're not subjected, I'm going to use that word intentionally, to people that think differently than you. And I think that's one of the failures of people who believe that they're leaders, but they've never taken themselves out of their comfort zone, right? It's really easy to lead people when there are no challenges, right? When the biggest challenge is, how do you approach the problem? Not with whom, or if the biggest challenge is, when do you approach the problem? Not how. They're easier answers, right? And so when you have someone like your friend Chris, who comes in, doesn't have experience, you don't know what you're doing. To your point, you're like, that probably was the first eye-opening experience where you really had to learn to lead, right? And mentor.
Yes, big time. big time, you know, and our department was at such a vital time at that time that, you know, it was, like you said, it was really a missed opportunity. And it really was that one thing that opened me up. Because, you know, like for me, I can get along with any duck hunter in this world, but I can't go and have a conversation with an accountant.
Right.
You know, and it's hard because it's like you're saying, it's like-minded. I don't understand an accountant's job. He doesn't understand mine. But a duck hunter or a fireman, like, we can talk for hours,
Right.
because we have that like-mindedness, you know.
Right.
And that's what it was with Chris. It's him. I really didn't have anything, and I, along with my own cockiness and complacency, and he fell between the cracks. And it was a very hard realization when it came around and slapped me in the face.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story and for being vulnerable with us. Because I'm sure you're not the only one who's gone through that. And that level of self-reflection and introspection is the difference in people who learn and get better and people who stay in that complacent space, right? And I think there's a lot of people who
Sure, absolutely
don't know how to get out of that. So you saw it, you felt it, you had that aha moment. Then what?
So at that point, you know, you have the aha moment, and then you go through a couple stages, right? You go through like very disappointed in yourself. I wouldn't say depression, but you go through that, like, maybe I'm not who I thought I was.
Yeah, kind of
And you're right.
What's the phrase for that? You're like an imposter syndrome.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So then it comes down to, you know, so how do I get to where I think I was and how do I get where I want to be? Right. And it went all the way back to, you know, my number one guy, who was Mike Lane. We also call him Pops. And so I basically copied what Pops did with me, but improved it and added a couple things to his process. And then that's when I came up with the love for the job process.
Tell me
And
about
when
that.
it comes to training rookies.
Tell me about that. You've established, so you and I got connected. You've told me you've got the Mentoring the Young program that you put together for
Right.
your department, but you actually are looking to do that externally as well. Tell me a little bit about that program and how it was created, and a little bit about the content if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, you know, when it came for that process, I knew that I couldn't just sit and tell people about it. I had to have some case studies, you could call them. And so I started using this process, and it's very simple, right? It's you got to figure out, you know, how do they learn, and you have to love them, and you have to do your job, and you have to figure out the things that make them tick, right? You have to get involved in their life. You know, you have to learn facts about them. And so I started going through and figuring this out, and have built up, you know, 5 or 6 people that I've used this process on. And when I finally said, okay, like, I know it works, I said, I have to get this out there. And I didn't know how to start. So I just built a class. I was sitting in a Texas Fire Chiefs Academy last October. And all I said in the class was, the rookies of today are failing because of us, because we're not doing our job. And I had a fire chief from New Braunfels turn around and he said, that's the best thing that I've ever heard when it comes to rookies. And he goes, you need to teach that. And so I developed a class right there. And I tried to get that class out for a while, and I couldn't get it out. And I got some good information from a good buddy of mine that said, why don't you write an article and get it out there? So I did. And so the class is called Mentoring the Young. The article was posted a couple months ago on Fire Rescue One, and it's called "Are Millennials Really the Problem?" Right? And so I developed this class, and I go around with FD tactics and I teach it, and it's all about my process and all about my case studies. And so I share real life experiences, and I share the trials and tribulations and the victories and the celebrations and the losses, and how I overcame all of that to where I am today, and have 6 successful case studies in a row.
I'm curious, is Chris usually the story that you share?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing with us and diving into some of your content. But that's exciting. So you're sitting in a class and somebody says, That's gold. Write it, put it down. How do you get the
Right.
word out? What is the value of that? Why do you do that? What's the value of that class for you? Why put it out?
So, you know, for me, one, it's I want to put it out because if there's anybody that's going through what I did with Chris, or vice versa, if there's any rookies that are going through what Chris was going through, then I want to be able to hopefully maybe stop that, or open up that window, right? When we lead and when we teach, we don't want to operate in a window like this. We want to operate in a window like this. And so I want to try to open that window, as well as I want mentoring to be the forefront of the fire service. And I think that it's been lost over the years. I think that we worry so much about so many other things that, yes, they affect the job, but the number one thing that affects the job is having bad mentors and bad leaders. And if we can't help, improve that, then I think as a service, we could be lost. And I don't want to see that, because I truly love my job.
Sure. Communication and relationship building is one piece of a community. But if you don't have that capability to build relationships with people that may not understand what you do, I mean, that's one of the big challenges in healthcare is if you go ask, neighbor Joe, who shows up when they call 911, most people don't even know. They don't know. Very few people, maybe just the people that worked in EMS in my experience, or have had an experience in EMS, know when you say EMS, even really immediately associate it. EMS, you say fire departments, they get it. But if you said public safety or population health or public health until recently with COVID, people don't even know what that means a lot of times. And I don't
have a clue. You're right.
I don't operate on an assumption that people are ignorant. I think there are plenty of those in the world, we know, but generally it's very telling of the population that people don't know. They just know they call a number and someone shows up. And that trust in I call a number and someone shows up is an incredible, powerful community relationship. And so I think what's the most interesting to me is we as healthcare providers, as EMS, as fire departments, as public safety, feel so much passion and pride for being a part of that community. And yet the community doesn't always know they're a part of us, right? Like, so I think
right, exactly.
Is sometimes really challenging. And so when you start with what you know, which is your department, which is your shift, which is your team, you start to get better at relationship building. You start to get better at articulating yourselves and walking through challenges. That jump to now I'm in an executive director position. Now I'm in a senior manager or a communication specialist or a fire chief or whatever that role is, where you're community facing. You've already done the dirty work, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
You've already learned.
And that's the right. And that's the thing that I think is what's kind of missing, and something that we do in Pearland that I'm really proud of, actually. And I wasn't proud of it at first, is, every so often, a couple years or so, we'll do like shift swaps. Right. So we just went through one in July where basically everybody's up for grabs, and we place people throughout the department on different shifts. And I got to keep some of the guys and girls on my shift, but also got a bunch of new ones. And that almost forces your leaders to become even more of a leader, or it forces them to step up if they might have been complacent. But along it also, it gets all these different personalities mixed up working together. So it keeps your department fresh. It keeps you flowing in the right direction, and it keeps improving the leadership qualities of all members, all the way down to the rookies through the fire chief. So, I think that's very important, like you're saying, is mixing that up and getting out of that comfort zone every now and then.
Right. Most people don't like change, right? They don't like
at all.
They don't like the unknown. They don't like to feel, it's the instability. It's not the change usually. It's the fear of the unknown that they're afraid. Right. If you said, we're going to change this thing, but let me give you this calculated, and it's a very spelled out, there's a risk, but it's low risk, or it's high risk, but they know exactly what it looks like, and there's no chance it's going to go any differently than what it's going to be. people would be okay with it. What people don't like about change most of the time is that uncertainty and that instability and that chaos. But to your point, sometimes when you intentionally add in some chaos, people stabilize, right? Because they want
Yes.
so badly to have that stabilization that they will work their tail off to get there, which
Right.
makes
Exactly. And not only that stabilization, but now sometimes they feel they have to prove themselves again. And so they truly become who they are, and all of their finest abilities pop out. And then you're like, wow, dude, this person here has just grown tremendously. Why? And it's not because you did anything as a leader. It's not because you are this remarkable person. It's because you were able to put them in a situation that made them come alive.
yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
Yeah. Well, that's clear that you are a leader, and I feel your passion. I really appreciate that. And I think it's a really neat thing, because you're right. It's that giving people the chance to shine, and real
That's
leaders
it.
look to find a way for their people to shine, because it's not about you, right? You've learned your things. You're going to keep learning.
Exactly.
You'll always keep learning. Your role, as I'm hearing you say it, is to teach other people how to go through that process, how to fail, how to come out better when you do, not to be afraid of it, but to understand it's part of the process. So I love that. I feel,
Right.
like Pearland's fortunate to have you as a leader. And I've been calling you Jacob, but I guess Chief Johnson is probably more appropriate. People are so funny about that.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Someone will message me and go, "You're so disrespectful." But I think,
Oh, no.
it's a first name thing for me. But there are people in this industry, yours. I was in private EMS where, you give someone a title, and very quickly you see if they are a leader, in my mind, because when you put people in that role,
Sure.
and you put them on, in a sense, a pedestal, right? Because when you get a title, people expect certain things from you. And it's
Absolutely.
to watch when things change under that level below, in your experience, a shift bid, or a process change or whatever. You see the people that follow that leader, and the people that push on that leader, which I don't think is a bad thing, but you learn a lot about a leader.
No, it's not.
You learn a lot about a leader when you watch the people that follow them. And so I think it's telling
Absolutely
about your leadership abilities that you're like, let's cause the chaos and get people to figure it out, because they're growing. And the thing that you're talking about is not the person who has 3 different partners and can't seem to get it right. You went to when you see people shine. And that level of optimism is something that I see in you, and I respect and appreciate, because I think there's not a lot of that. Maybe there is a lot of that. I don't hear it enough. So let's talk about it more, right? Because
sure. Yeah, I mean it. And I really appreciate those compliments from you and the comments, because the thing is, this is, if any fire officer hears this tonight, like, the one thing that I'd want them to hear is, like, your job is to ensure that your guys and girls have the career that you have had. Like, for me, I've had a phenomenal career. I mean, one for the record books. I wouldn't change a thing about it. I've absolutely loved it. And so if I have to retire, or if I have to quit, or God forbid I have to die, just to save someone from my crew so they would experience just a little bit what I have, then I know I'm doing my job. And that should be the job of all officers, that you protect your men, you protect and women, you protect your citizens. You go in when you need to, and you do your job. But at the end of the day, like, you should leave the foundation there, that your men and women on your crew can follow in your footsteps and have the career that you have had. Because if I could look back in 20 years and go to all of my crew's retirement parties, and they say, "Hey, I had the best career ever," well, then I succeeded. I don't need anything else.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else we can leave with. I am so appreciative of your time. So you've got a course, you've put it out. You're working with FD Tactics, is that right?
Yes, correct. Howard Reinwald owns it, and he runs it for us.
Okay. So if somebody's interested in hearing what you have to say, bringing in your session, how do they get a hold of you? How do they continue the conversation? And I have to note, you having this conversation and putting this out here is a level of mentorship. Even though earlier you alluded to the people that are going through this, or the people that are, have a leader that they can't seem to get to, they have a titled manager, I'll say, that they can't get to lead them, or a leader who can't get their subordinate to follow them. I think you offering yourself as a third party, as somebody on the outside, is a level of mentorship. And I appreciate that and see that too. So thank you for that. So if somebody wants to engage with you, how do they do that? What's the best way to reach you?
All right. So, I mean, there's several different things. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and they can call me. I'll give anybody my personal phone number. They can email me, or, you can look up FD Tactics and reach out to Howard Reinwald, Chief Reinwald, and schedule a class through him. I'm willing to help anybody and everybody. I'm willing to teach classes on Zooms if people need the help, and I'm willing just to have good old conversations. So, I mean, whatever people need, I'm there for them. I just have to know about it. So reach out and I'll pick up the phone for sure.
That's true emergent leadership, my friend. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. I had a blast.